Hey guys, how's it going? I'm Alex Perry, and I'm a filmmaker and content creator based out of Toronto, Canada. Now, before we get started, I would absolutely appreciate if you would support the channel and just hit that subscribe button. It would really mean a lot to me. Also, while you're at it, why don't you head over to Instagram and follow me at Alex S. Perry. That's the best way to connect with me, and even if you want to reach out and have a conversation on tips and tricks on how to get started, anything related to filmmaking, or even starting a YouTube channel. So, follow me over on Instagram. Alright, so now let's get to it. What I like to do is plan out all the individual steps that there are to whatever it is the action or sequence that this whole thing is making sure you're shooting in manual focus mode. Okay, so the first shot we have is with the cocoa powder. So if something isn't really exciting or there's not much to it, you're gonna want to add a little flair to it. Going kind of across her body to pull off the cap, right? So that the whole time the camera's following this action. Just get creative with it. Just try different movements, try different motions, try different framing, right? Get creative, and you'll find that your end result is gonna be something that you'll be very happy with. Okay, so there you have it. That's how I filmed the main sequence there. So now we're gonna just jump into talking about just quickly how we edit this thing together. So sequences like this are, once again, they're pretty simple. I know they look a little bit crazy, and because of all the different actions and motions and dynamic shots we've got here, it could be a little intimidating at first glance. But if you look at my timeline here, it's very simple and straightforward. A lot of the clips were just cut back to back. I found the exact moments and times I wanted to cut them and trim them. I did put my music track in the timeline first, started playing it through, started adding my clips in. But yeah, overall, just like cutting it to the beat of the music, trying to make things work. It was pretty simple for a video like this. I think that the two biggest things here for the finishing touches for a video like this are obviously color grading it. So like all videos, like all projects I work on, I first color correct it and then I color grade it. So there's a difference between that. Color correcting is just getting everything to look standard and normal, so fixing your highlights, your shadows, your contrast, your brightness, all that kind of stuff. Color temperature, just making everything just looks good and normal, especially if you're filming it in a flat color profile. So you just want to make sure you color correct first and then color grade it. Just think about things like the style of what you're going for, or the kind of vibe and look and feel you're going for in the video. I wanted to have warm, cozy lighting for this whole thing, right? It's that whole like holiday feel. It's got that like cozy winter nights kind of feel to it. So I just had my lamp on in the corner, dimmed it down, make sure I had all of my warm tungsten lights on in the room, put the Christmas lights on. Keep those things in mind when you are filming, because then once you go to color grading it after, you want to make sure you're keeping those things in mind as well. So I still wanted that whole warm feel to the whole thing. So I color graded it a certain way to make sure it matched the style and aesthetic I was going for when I was filming it. Also, for my main key light, I did want it to be that more normal, like white, not normal, but that white daylight balanced look. So having everything else with that warm look, you want a little bit of a contrast in there with the lighting. So I had the daylight balanced aperture 120D on the big softbox attachment off to the front left-hand side, aiming kind of down towards the objects and my subject. So that this would create a nice soft white light on both Kristen, on the items and objects that are going to be on the tabletop that we are filming here. Also, because of the lights in the scene, as you can see, we were going once again for that warm tungsten look. By having the light off to the left-hand side there, I felt like the right of the image was a little bit dark and in shadow. So I wanted to fill that in a little bit. So I just set up one of my LED panel lights that I have that has a hard plastic gel, if you want to call it that, that is in the warm color temperature that you just slide in front, which also diffuses the light to make it soft. And I just dimmed it right down. It was almost at like the dimmest it could go, because I just wanted to fill in the shadows ever so slightly while having a little bit of that warm orange glow to it, right? If I used just a white foam board, it would have just filled it in with more white light, but I just wanted the key light to be white. I didn't want the rest of it to be white. So I wanted to make it look like that was just natural light from the scene, that was like a light off screen that was coming in and filling in those shadows a little bit. Okay, and finally, the sound. The sound design is, I'd say, the most important part of this whole thing. you could, it's important in any video you make or film, but in something like this, you could do the coolest camera movements, you could do the most crazy shots, you can make it look all beautiful, color graded amazingly, and then have no sound design to your video, and the whole thing just falls flat. It'll just be like, right? What I typically do is after the fact, I go on to a service like Epidemic Sound, and that is where I'll search for sound effects that I can use in my video. So I look at each individual action that's happening, and I try to type in. First, I start off by typing in the exact action that it is. So like, rolling can on desk, for example. A lot of the time, if it's too specific, you're not gonna find that. So then you have to try to get creative with like how you can find sounds that are similar, right? So you can start typing in like rolling can or just something like rolling object. And then you just see what's available and start testing it out and see what works. I'd say I found about 90% of the sounds that I needed on Epidemic Sound actually. But there were a couple that I just really couldn't get or that just didn't really work for what I wanted. So I ended up going back after and recording some sounds. So sound design is super important. So watch, I'm gonna play you this clip now, or the whole sequence now, without any of the sounds in it and just with the music. Okay, so notice how that, it was still okay, it still looked good, the music is still catchy and fun, but it just sounds like there's something missing, right? So now, just to show you the difference, I'm gonna strip out the music, but leave the sound effects in there. So notice how on its own, some of the sounds almost sound exaggerated and a little bit crazy and larger than life. But honestly, it makes a world of a difference. And then when you're playing that back with music, you just play around with the audio levels to get them to a point where you're comfortable. You don't want them to be like screaming loud and like overbearing, but just make them at a point in which you're happy, where it's not overpowering your whole video and not taking away from it. And you can tell like how much better it is when you have all these sound effects in place, when you've got everything lit up the way it has to be, so that everything all the main actions have a sound to go along with it, right? So always focus on your sound design, and that is one of the best ways that you will get a really epic looking B-roll cinematic sequence. Okay, so another good tip I have for you is on the topic of actually filming it handheld, because I'm sure a lot of you actually want to know about that. I think people are kind of intimidated for shooting handheld, especially in a day when there's so many electronic gimbals out there to help stabilize your footage. The idea of just filming handheld can be a little bit scary and daunting to some people, but it's really not all that bad. And even if you're using a camera that doesn't have in-body stabilization or a lens that doesn't have it, you can still make this work. So this is my Sony a6300. I filmed the whole sequence with my Sigma 30mm f1.4 lens. Now, because it is a Sigma lens and not a Sony branded lens, there is no, in-lens or in-body stabilization that's available to use. So if you're just filming it like this, you're gonna see all these little micro jitters. So there are a few things you can do to make sure your footage doesn't have those little jitters, and to make your footage look stable. So a couple of the big ones that I make sure I always do is don't hold the camera with one hand just like this, right? Or just, have it like that. And whenever you're doing movements, you don't want to do it just off like rotation like this, just with like your wrists, right? And even when you're moving and running, like that is the biggest way you're gonna get these small little jittery movements, right? If you tuck in your elbows to your chest and then you make that your movement, I don't know if you can see the difference there, but you're automatically changing how the camera is moving, right? So the ups and downs aren't as small. They're bigger, which reduces that whole little jitter shake, right? So tucking in your elbows to your chest or to your stomach, depending on like how you're holding it and when you're standing, and then just stiffening up your actual arms here, you're kind of making this almost like a rig, right? So you'll have to just do what works best for you. Like I've got my desk in the way here right now, but if I were to stand up and aim down like this, you just tuck them in, stiffen up your arms, and make sure your whole body is kind of moving in sync, right, with the camera. So another thing is going to be to actually shoot it in a high frame rate. So if your camera supports this, shooting at something like 120 frames per second is going to help you out as well. You know, if you want those slow motion segments in your video, you're going to have to do this anyway. So I filmed this whole sequence in 120 frames per second. Why am I out of breath? Just from standing up and doing that, I am out of shape. I gotta work out. Anyway, so I filmed my whole sequence in 120 frames per second because I knew I wanted to have some slow motion shots in this video. I could have gone back and forth and filmed it in different frame rates. Like I could have shot a bunch of it at 24 frames per second, but that makes things too complicated. For a shoot like this, there's gonna be a lot of takes because you're, once again, trying to sync up your movements with your actor or your model. So I already have a lot of takes and a lot of things to film there, so I didn't want to complicate it further by switching frame rates. So I shot the whole thing in 120 frames per second, but then I made my output file 24 frames per second, right? I'm not gonna get into that further right now because I know there's lots of videos out there that explain how to properly do slow motion sequences and all that fun stuff. But so shooting at something like a higher frame rate, like 120 frames per second, will also help with that as well. So if you're keeping it more stiff and you're doing that, and then you're slowing your footage down into slow motion, that naturally gets rid of all the little movements because they become slower and a lot more smooth looking, right? All right, well there you have it. I think that pretty much covers everything. So thanks so much for watching. I hope you learned something here today. You know, I hope you can take what you saw here and just start making a bunch of your own cinematic sequences in this style. If you do need any help with that, just please reach out to me. You can just follow me, once again, at Alex S. Perry on Instagram. That's the best way to get in touch with me, reach out to me. So you can just leave a comment on one of my photos, you can send me a DM, and I'll probably respond to you the quickest that way. And while you're at it, if you like this video, then why don't you just hit that like button down below? It would mean the world to me if you would do that. And if you would just, you know, leave me a comment, just letting me know what you thought. While you're at it, I think you should hit that subscribe button, like I mentioned earlier. It would really mean the world to me if you would just support the channel, hit that subscribe button, and don't forget to ring that little bell notification icon so you get notified every single time I drop new videos like this one. There is a lot more coming your way, like I always tell you, so stay tuned. Yeah. I think that pretty much wraps up this video. My name is Alex Perry, and I will see you in the next one. See ya.